Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. I am Scott Bevan and I am here today live from Glasgow with the news. First then for the coronavirus update. As of 2 pm today, a total of 2,141,839 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK Government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,889,928 have been confirmed negative. 251,911 have tested positive. There are 950 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test, although not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There are 2 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 7,690 people. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 128 were in hospital last night, 12 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 am this morning, 3,591,638 people have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 2,535,803 had received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show 127,956 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 11 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. To the news then, UK food and drink exports to the EU have fallen by 47%. UK food and drink exports to the EU fell by $2 billion in the first 3 months of 2021, with sales of dairy products plummeting by 90%, according to an analysis of HMRC data. Brexit checks, stockpiling and COVID have been blamed for much of the downturn, but the sector has said that figures show structural rather than teething problems with the UK's departure from the EU. Analysis from the Food and Drink Federation (FDF) reveals EU sales dropped by 47% in the first 3 months of 2021 to a 10-year low, causing a loss of $2 billion to the UK economy. The figures show that fish, 51.7%, salmon, minus 19.7%, whiskey, minus 32.3%, lamb, minus 14.3%, and cheese products, minus 71.7%, were among the products that were hardest hit. Sales fell across Europe, with exports to Ireland being minus 70.8%, to Spain being minus 62.9%, to Italy being minus 61%, and to Germany falling 54.9%. FDF head of international trade Dominic Guidi said the collapse in exports was a disaster for the industry and a very clear indication of the scale of losses that UK manufacturers face in the longer term due to the new trade barriers with the EU. Commenting, SNP International Trade spokesperson Drew Hendry, MP, said, "It is increasingly clear that independence is the only way to keep Scotland safe from the long-term damage of Boris Johnson's hard Tory Brexit deal, which has been disastrous. Brexit has already cost Scotland billions of pounds, and analysis shows it will continue to hit our economy," he said, cutting Scotland's GDP by up to $9 billion by 2030, compared to EU membership. Mr. Hendry went on to say that the food and drinks industry has already suffered, with fishing communities, farmers and businesses across Scotland losing millions of pounds in trade. He highlighted also the need for Scotland to have the right to determine their own future in a post-pandemic independence referendum in order to meet Scotland's desires and needs. The Liberal Democrats have won the Chesham and Amersham by-election. In a result that exceeded even the expectations of party activists, the Lib Dems' Sarah Green overturned a 16,000 Conservative majority to take the Chesham and Amersham seat. by just over 8,000 votes, a swing of 25%. Boris Johnson conceded that the result in Cheshire and Amersham was disappointing, but rejected the idea it shows he is alienating voters in the south of England. Amid significant tactical voting in the commuter belt seat northwest of London, Labour slumped from more than 7,000 votes in the 2019 election to just 622 votes, and only 1.6% of the vote share, with the English and Welsh Greens coming in third. Sarah Green, a marketing company owner and long-time Lib Dem activist, ended up with 21,517 votes, almost 57% vote share. The Tory candidate Peter Fleet, a former Ford executive who has spent most of the past 15 years based abroad, won 13,489 votes. The Lib Dems devoted huge resources to the by-election, with Davey visiting 16 times. The Conservatives, in contrast, appeared to realise relatively late that they were in danger, upon which they sent out extra resources, including Theresa May, who spent Thursday night trying to get Tory voters out to the polls. First doses have been booked in for all adults ahead of schedule in Scotland. All adults in Scotland will have been booked in for their first coronavirus COVID-19 vaccine appointment by the end of next week, the 27th of June, 5 weeks ahead of the initial target of the 31st of July. Letters are currently going out to those 18 to 29-year-olds who didn't sign up to the self-registration portal, and anyone who has yet to receive their blue envelope can see the time of their vaccination online through a new appointment checker. The new system allows people to see their appointment details in the system and enables them to reschedule if the timing or location is unsuitable. In addition, from Monday the 21st of June, all NHS boards will be routinely scheduling second doses 8 weeks after the first to help combat the emergence of the Delta variant. Health Secretary Hamza Yusuf has said, "I am delighted that we are on the brink of reaching the major milestone of having scheduled first doses for all adults 5 weeks ahead of schedule." A rise in Delta variant cases has led to travel restrictions in Manchester. A rise in the prevalence of Delta variant cases has led to travel restrictions being placed on Manchester and Salford. The new rules on travel between Scotland and neighbouring northwest cities comes into effect on Monday. It is part of wider measures put in place to prevent variants of concern being brought into Scotland from areas with high cases of the COVID-19 Delta variant. Transport Secretary Michael Matheson said, "Nobody wants travel restrictions in place for any longer than is absolutely necessary." He said placing restrictions on travel between Scotland and Manchester and Salford has only been taken after extremely careful consideration and analysis of data to help prevent the spread of these variants of concern. A new coronavirus bill has been introduced in Scotland. A 6-month extension of emergency measures granted under the Scottish Coronavirus Acts will be debated in Parliament next week. The Coronavirus Extension and Expiry Scotland Bill was formally introduced to the Scottish Parliament today and will be scrutinised and debated by MSPs over 3 days from the 22nd of June. The bill removes a number of measures no longer considered necessary to support the ongoing public health response, and extends others beyond the original expiry date of the 30th of September 2021, subject to the agreement of Parliament, to the 31st of March now of 2022. These include major changes to how the court system operates, as well as provisions to keep businesses and public services running during the pandemic, and temporary changes to the law for debtors and tenants facing financial hardship. Measures proposed for the extension for a further 6 months include the ability for hearings across criminal and civil courts and tribunals to be held remotely, an increased notice period of 6 months to protect private and social sector tenants from eviction, up from the pre-pandemic 28-day notice period, an increase in the minimum debt level that an individual must owe before a creditor can make them bankrupt, at 10,000 now, up from 3,000 pre-pandemic. Measures proposed for expiry include emergency operational measures in respect of children's hearings and child protection to ensure that children's rights have been protected throughout this period. Stop the clock measures on the duration of guardianship orders and certificates authorising medical treatment for adults with incapacity as the normal systems for processing these resume. Provisions requiring the Scottish Ministers and the Registrar General of Births, Deaths and Marriages for Scotland to take steps to ensure that couples could still marry or enter a civil partnership now that local registration offices are able to reopen. The bill does not introduce any new measures, and it does not cover travel registrations, which are a devolved public health measure, or lockdown measures, which are implemented by Scottish ministers within the UK Coronavirus Act 2020. The EU has reached a deal on economic sanctions against Belarus. The European Union is set to ban new loans to Belarus, after reaching a deal on Friday for economic sanctions on Minsk as punishment for forcing down a flight to arrest a journalist, according to the Austrian Foreign Ministry. Broad economic sanctions would be the EU's strongest response yet to the forced landing of a Ryanair flight in May by Belarusian authorities to arrest an exiled dissident, a move that EU's leaders have called state piracy. Restrictions on the Belarusian financial sector, if agreed by EU governments at a political level, will include a ban on new loans, a ban on EU investors from trading securities or buying short-term bonds, and a ban also on EU banks from providing investment services. EU export creditors will also end. Today's agreement overcame objections from Austria, whose Raiffeisen Bank International is a big player in Belarus through its prior bank subsidiary. EU leaders meet next Thursday for a scheduled summit. It is not clear if they will approve the deal agreed by expert officials. The EU, NATO, Britain, Canada, and the United States have expressed outrage that a flight between EU members, Greece and Lithuania, was pressed to land in Minsk, and authorities then arrested the 26-year-old exiled dissident with his 23-year-old girlfriend. Juneteenth becomes a federal holiday celebrating the end of slavery in the US. The USA will officially recognise Juneteenth, which commemorates the end of slavery in America, as a federal holiday, after Joe Biden signed the bill into law on Thursday. At a jubilant White House ceremony, the president emphasised the need for the US to reckon with its history, even when that history is shameful. Great nations don't ignore their most painful moments, Biden said, before he established what will be known as Juneteenth National Independence Day. Great nations don't walk away, he said. We come to terms with the mistakes that we have made, and remembering those moments, we begin to heal and grow stronger. Just before signing the bill, President Biden added, "I've only been president for the past several months, but I think this will go down for me as one of the greatest honours I will have had as president." Vice President Kamala Harris, also in attendance, reflected on the historic nature of the day and the presence of black lawmakers who worked diligently to advance the bill. Harris, who is the first black woman to serve as vice president, told those at the White House for the bill signing that we are gathered here in a house built by enslaved people. We are footsteps away from where President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth commemorates the day in 1865 when news of the Emancipation Proclamation reached the people of Galveston, Texas, freeing slaves in the last rebel state. Abraham Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, but the proclamation wasn't in force in Galveston until federal soldiers read it out on the 19th of June 1865. Black Americans are rejoicing at the move, but many say that more is needed to address continued systemic racism. The UK government may soon privatise Channel 4 as soon as next year. Channel 4 could now be sold off as soon as next year, with the government planning to launch a formal consultation into the broadcaster's privatisation within weeks. Last month, the Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden confirmed it may move to privatise Channel 4 by the end of the current Parliament, in what they described as providing a sustainable future for the broadcaster. But on Thursday, the Financial Times reported that a decision could be made by the end of this year. John Whittingdale, the Culture Minister with responsibility for broadcast policy, will oversee this consultation. He first advocated for the 38-year-old channel's privatisation in 1996. The government also considered a sell-off when Whittingdale was Culture Secretary in 2015, but ultimately backed down. The Financial Times have reported that the aim is to pass legislation to implement the changes by the end of 2022, according to sources familiar with the discussions. During a meeting of the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee in May, Dowden repeated that the privatisation of Channel 4 was on the table as part of a government review of public service broadcasting, first announced in October of 2020. Additional funding is to be provided to help people with eating disorders. An additional $5 million will be provided to NHS boards to help expand the treatments available to people with eating disorders. Some of the investments, which come from the Mental Health Recovery and Renewal Fund, will also be allocated to BEAT, the UK's eating disorder charity, to provide a wide range of support options to families, carers and those affected, as well as support for children, young people and adults. An implementation group will also be established. It will be jointly chaired by former MSP Dennis Robertson, who has campaigned for greater awareness of eating disorders since his daughter Carolyn tragically died with anorexia nervosa in 2011. A clinical co-chair will be confirmed at a later date. The funding and implementation group are recommendations of the National Review of Eating Disorder Services, which was published in March. Mental Health Wellbeing Minister Kevin Stewart said, "Sadly, we have seen an increase in young people needing treatment for eating disorders since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. This additional funding will go some way to make sure that they have the support that they need." He continued, "The funding will help NHS boards and BEAT to further develop the services on offer. I look forward to working with Dennis and the clinical co-chair to ensure that the right support is in place." And finally then, Scotland are to face off against England tonight at Wembley Stadium. In what is being seen as a must-win game for the Scots following their 2-0 defeat on Monday at the hands of the Czech Republic, Scotland will face a side a full 40 places above them in the FIFA international rankings. Steve Clarke's men will take on an England side riding high following their victory over Croatia last weekend, as thousands of Scotland fans pay visit to the capital ahead of what is being billed as the Scotland men's team's biggest footballing moment for over 2 decades. Speculation was underway this week as to the inclusion of Arsenal left-back Kieran Tierney, who missed out against the Czechs, but has now officially been confirmed fit for tonight's game. Parallels have been drawn between this match this evening and the last time that Scotland and England played one another in a major tournament back in 1996. Scotland will hope for a better result than on that day at Wembley, when goals by Paul Gascoigne and Alan Shearer and an infamous penalty miss put an effective end to Scotland's hopes then of qualification for the second round. The historic match kicks off in about 40 minutes at 8 o'clock. There are some interesting developments happening at Broadcasting Scotland that we will keep you abreast of in the coming weeks. Maggie will be here with the full Scottish on Sunday, and I will be with you again Monday evening for the news. We can only do what we do here at Broadcasting Scotland thanks to your support and your generous donations. If it is within your power at all, then please do consider donating to ensure that we can continue bringing you programming that is not beholden to either government or commercial interest. That's all from us this evening. All that's left for me to say then is good evening, good health, and good luck, Scotland.
How do you mean no more commission?
Well, no one in Scotland can commission an idea. You know, if I went to BBC Scotland and I said, oh, I've got this great idea for a sitcom, I've got this brilliant idea for a drama, you know, there isn't one person in Scotland that can okay it unless it goes through London.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of Full Scottish. What's happening today?
Hello and welcome to the Full Scottish here on Broadcasting Scotland.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
That need, that desire for independence is ever stronger than perhaps it was in 2014. So there's an obligation that we've got to give leadership to that campaign. That's what Nicola Sturgeon, as our First Minister, has been doing.
My feeling about Boris Johnson is he can't be trusted on anything.
That is now and forever will be known as the rape clause.
I'm old enough to remember going into Europe in '73, and I remember how much of a razor's edge that was a battling stone. And I think we made it by 53%, if I remember correctly, for going in. And ever since that time, England particularly has been pretty much schizophrenic, down the middle about whether it felt British or whether it felt European. And that schism, that crack has remained throughout English society ever since.
Scotland means business. Scotland's voice won't be stilled, it won't be silenced, it has to be heard.
The work that's been done by Broadcasting Scotland in giving community activists, yes activists, Scottish activists a platform other than the traditional media outlets.